911 operators of Reddit, what's the strangest, serious emergency you've heard? 4 years into my life as a dispatcher, and I have personally taken or been party to suicide by gunshot while still on 911. I didn't take the call, but I played it back to make sure we heard what we thought we had. A woman who managed to dial us, but all we could hear was her agonal breathing, which was very, very spooky in retrospect. A multiple vehicle DUI crash where people were pinned and screaming. I'm not talking about fear screaming, I'm talking about agonized screaming. Compound fractures, head injuries, etc. Every time someone got on the radio you had to strain to hear them over screams that were like nothing I've ever heard. People finding suicides are bad. Anything with children is bad. An amputation by lawnmower comes to mind. CPR is always a struggle because people are scared and sometimes, like I mentioned, you can hear the person's last breaths. Gunshots are unmistakable. Sometimes it takes a while to get to sleep after a shift. Not a 911 operator, but was in the vicinity. My best friend, we will call D, and I walked in his parents' house, expecting to find his girlfriend, let's call her K, on the couch or the bed, where we were all gonna smoke a joint, chill, and I was gonna crash on the couch. On that exact same couch was K, skin mostly pale, lips blue and a foam-like substance, a half-empty syringe beside her and a dinner plate with a then unknown powder on the coffee table in front of her. D freaks out, smacking her face, lying her on her side and desperately trying to get her to wake up. I don't care if they arrested all of us at this point and call 911. As I am talking to the 911 operator, D cries she's got a pulse, man. I think, and began hugging her, sobbing harder than Jesus. Please K, please wake up baby. His parents ended up coming downstairs. His mom freaked out and was crying, as his dad seen the plate and began screaming about drugs being in the house. It got bad. I walked outside to finish the call before I broke down. It was soul crushing to watch. Turns out K was still alive. Pulse was 35, very close to total cardiac arrest. The powder was fentanyl. No one was arrested. There's a law in my state that if EMTs are called and not police, the suspect cannot legally be charged with any drugs found at the location. They kept her for 2 days, giving her Narcan all throughout the first night. She went to rehab, and now she is with another classmate, happily married and with 2 children. D, well, not so well, but that's for another time. That's actually a really great and sensible law. I wish it didn't surprise me so much. My grandmother was a dispatcher and police officer in a small town. While on duty one night, some guy came into the police station like the freaking Terminator and put a shotgun to her head while she was on the phone with my grandfather. Definitely a crazy story to hear her tell. Apparently the guy heard her tell my grandfather not to wake the kids up and he just left. Also, grandma is a bad bee. Some chick kicked her in the face with heels and broke her nose. Grandma whipped her butt, broken nose and all. Please don't wake the kids up, dear husband. I may be home a bit late. Then, quick as lightning, Granny pulls out her pistol she always keeps on her person ever since the incident, and before the wannabe Terminator can react, he's already on the floor with a hole in his head. Fiancé is a paramedic. I'm a patient care tech. While doing a catheter on a lady, she once told us that it doesn't go in the urethra but in the hole the dong goes in. LMAO. Fiancé transported a psych patient to a facility, so they're chilling in the back of the ambo and she's talking to her purse. After about 5 minutes of this, she unzips her purse and a freaking opossum jumps out. My fiancé loses it, has no idea what to say or do. Then the PT proceeds to tell him if it wasn't for this lil fella I would have killed myself a long time ago. Also last week he got a call to a pretty bad part of town that ended up being a domestic violence. Husband beat the crap out of his wife because she wouldn't do M with him. She ended up having a pretty serious subdural hematoma. One day I had walked in after getting a Subway sandwich. My shift started at 1 PM. Co-workers had received both 911 and normal calls from a wife and mother about their husband's son. He was just walking around and talking about taking all the children to heaven and circling the house for hours. There was a newborn, a toddler, and I think a 5-year-old. It was on a weekend and our chief advised that as long as he isn't acting dangerous or violent, just odd, then they can wait for a mental health warrant from the Justice of the Peace on Monday. It's East Texas and it's a good 20-30 minute drive going the speed limit to get anywhere in the county, and sometimes over an hour from one end to another, if you know where you are going. Well, this continues, up until about 11 p.m. The mother and wife are getting more and more antsy that he's been walking in circles all day and muttering the same thing for hours. Then I get a call that begins with a loud bang, screaming and crying from the wife and her newborn. The husband had killed his 2 sons and mother with a shotgun and was coming for her. She cried that why didn't we help them, and to please save me and my babies. And then after about 10 seconds, another bang. The wife was killed near instantly and the baby had 1-2 pellets into its head and was making gurgling sounds before dying. After that, maybe a minute later, I heard another bang. The guy had put a slug into his shotgun and blasted the top portion of his face off, laid on the ground and drowned in his blood, and that's it. Not an operator, though. I want to be now. This is a 911 call on me made by my BF in our small hometown. I have a rare disease called fibrous dysplasia McCune-Albright syndrome. FD is where some places on one or more of your bones is replaced with fibrous tissue. This makes them bend, break, and deform easily. I have it in multiple vital bones of my body. Well, this leads to the one fateful night, actually exactly 1 year ago tonight, where my BF has to call 911. He says, "We need an ambulance." She asks what for, to which he responds, "My girlfriend has FD and her legs broke." Her. Was there an accident? Did she fall? Him. Number. She was walking, getting a bit annoyed. Her. Unbelieving despite my continuous screaming in the background. What makes you think they're broken? What happened? Him. Just done just. Her legs are weak and they broke. Send an ambulance. Her. Okay, sir. I'm sending help. But, did she hit something? Did she fall on something wrong? How do you know they're broken? Him. Gets right up by me while I'm screaming her legs are broken. Click. The ambulance that showed up wasn't even fully prepared. I guess they really did have a hard time believing that someone's legs could just break on them while walking. They had to tear up a box we had laying nearby to stabilize it as much as possible, and they had to lift me to the stretcher thing in a sheet with the help of the fireman. That was absolutely excruciating, with a broken left tibia, broken left fibula, and broken and completely displaced right femur. The worst. No meds until they got me to the plane to flight me to the hospital in the nearest city. Lesson to operators. Sometimes people aren't juicy crazy. Sometimes bones really do just break. I'm sorry that condition sounds awful. In the UK so was 999, not 911. I once spoke to a man that called up to say that he had slipped while getting out of the bath, and as he fell, the toilet brush somehow went up his rectum, and was now stuck, and he couldn't move. Turned out that during his fall, the toilet brush somehow got a condom put onto it. Dirty old man. There was once a time when a man phoned up and said his son was having a heart attack in the street. The ambulance was called and I was giving instructions over the phone what to do. When the crew arrived, the call didn't actually disconnect. I heard the ambulance crew ask where the son was, and the man said, "Right there. Can't you see?" I just heard the ambulance crew say, "Sir, that's a jacket on the floor, not a person." Then the line cut out. I have lots more stories. The worst thing about working there was that you rarely got to find out what happened after you ended the call. Haven't been a dispatcher in years, but when I was, a few calls come to mind. One, a man calls about his friend breaking his dong. Poor guy in the background is screaming in pain. 2, wife called in cause her hub's got a corn cob stuck. 3, old woman called. I honestly don't remember her complaint, but at some point she stopped talking. I kept calling out to her but no answer. She was dead when the EMTs arrived. She died while she was talking to me. 4, frantic woman calls about a drowning toddler at a party. She said they thought it was a doll floating in the pool. Complete chaos in the background. Kid died. Not the best day. I'm not a 911 operator, but I work in the emergency department at a level 1 trauma center. I got some interesting ones. 1. We had a helicopter land. MVC. Motor vehicle crash. Involving a toddler, a bear, and some serious burns. Apparently this family has the worst luck. They were going highway speeds, just dad with toddler in the back. The car in front of them hit a bear on the highway. Dad pulled over to help the other driver, leaving kid in their car seat in the back seat. Then another car came and hit the dad's car. The kid's car seat was pushed into the front passenger seat. Then the dad's car caught fire with the kid in it. Dad pulled the kid out, burning both his arms pretty badly. The kid had third-degree burns covering a good portion of his body. 2. Another MVC. PT was driving home from family event and swerved off the road right into a tree. One leg severed at the scene, the other barely hanging on. Paramedics brought the PT in, carrying the amputated leg in a bag behind the PT. PT would lose the other leg in surgery. 3. Psych patient trauma. Patient apparently didn't want to be a male anymore, so they took a razor blade too. Well, you can imagine. 4. 4th of July fireworks injury via deer. Senior citizen PT was celebrating the 4th with family outside. Apparently their property is near the woods because when they started shooting fireworks, a deer came out of the woods scared as crap and kicked grandma in the head while trying to jump over her. 5. I was walking from one part of the ED to the other when I heard a trauma called out on Vocera. I then see the Tridge medic sprinting down the hall with a baby in his arms, followed by what I guessed was mom and dad. The Tridge medic was calling for people to clear the way as he was running to the trauma area. I start calling out too. Along the way, blocking the trauma pod is an old woman with a walker and a slightly less old woman directing her. I yell at them to move, and they stand there like a deer in headlights. I physically had to drag the walker, and the old lady holding onto it, out of the way before the medic ran them over. Baby's aunt was pulling out of the driveway and had run and nearly run over baby. Baby had a nice dent in their skull, but was screaming loudly, which is a good thing. 6. First call meeting helicopter. Attempted suicide via shotgun. Half the face was blown off. Still alive, and living to this day, I believe. We had this medical call where a guy's wife called and was saying that something was wrong with him. She claimed he had worms coming out of him. We sent an ambulance and a deputy due to the suspicious call. Deputy arrives on scene and reports to us that the caller was 100% right. The guy had worms coming out of him. Turns out, and medically trained people of Reddit, please forgive me because I don't know the medical terminology here, but it turns out that the guy had some type of bacteria fungi that you get from messing around with animal feces. But the the medic said they had never seen a case as bad as his. Sounds like Ascaris, parasitic worms. ME 911, what is the location of your emergency? Caller, please help me. I get address, name, phone number. ME, tell me exactly what happened. Caller, please believe me. Why isn't anyone believing me? ME, do you need police, fire, or EMS? Caller, there is chocolate coming out of my tea. What? ME, what do you mean? Caller, I don't know. I just woke up and there is chocolate coming from my tea. My grandma and mother won't believe me. I can hear people in the background having casual conversation. ME, so, how do you know it's chocolate? Caller, I smelled it. Gag. Anyways, if you're not familiar, most 911 agencies in the US have EMS protocols we choose from, i.e., breathing difficulty, back pain, chest pain, traumatic injury. There are 34 to choose from, and at this point, I'm at a loss on deciding which protocol to use. I'm debating between the standard sick call, which is what we choose when nothing else works, or a hemorrhage card, which is what I end up picking, thinking it's just a bad period, and not chocolate. I end up giving her all the medical information and send EMS. I never heard from her again, but I do send the EMS unit that went a message asking about it. ME, so, was it chocolate? EMS, IDK, we didn't taste it. I tend not to remember the sad real emergencies, because that's depressing. The funny stuff is what usually sticks with me, if anything. But since you said serious emergency, there's only one that sticks out. 7 AM, roughly when the PD shift changes, so it's hard to get cars to respond. We get a call from someone in a park near a local college reporting a body on fire on the pedestrian bridge over the river. We send out police, thinking so here it is, because 99 times out of 100, it's gonna either be a false call or a crazy person. Well, this was the 100th time. Officers get on scene to a freaking body on fire and suddenly everyone's headed there as quickly as possible. Dispatch shift changes at 8 AM instead of 7:30 like the various PDs. Suffice to say, it was a busy last hour of my shift. Not a 911 operator, but I once called 911 when my friend and I had been out walking our dogs and noticed a car drive by several times. We both got a super weird feeling about the car and we knew most of the cars of our neighbors and it wasn't any of those, so we called 911 about a suspicious vehicle driving around the complex. I should add that we had just had a huge rash of robberies in the complex, further adding to our suspicions. So after we called, I turned on my radio to hear the dispatcher openly mock us for calling 911. About 15 minutes later we hear popping noises and we hear someone peel out of the driver block over. So we then hear police on the radio responding to calls about gunshots in the building behind us. Turns out that car we had reported was a man looking for his ex-girlfriend and he shot her and her new boyfriend. They both lived if I recall correctly, and we got to talk to several cops about what we had seen and all that. I definitely felt stupid calling 911 about a suspicious vehicle, but I am trusting my instincts from now on. TLDR. I called 911 about a suspicious vehicle. 911 operator made fun of me over radio. Owner of the vehicle I called about shot his ex and her boyfriend 15 minutes after I called. I wasn't the dispatcher, but I was called for mutual aid to a call one time. My buddy was the dispatcher that night for the county sheriff and I was volunteering at a rural fire department. Anyway, around 11 PM we get paged out for a mutual aid, a search operation for a missing hunter at a local hunting camp. It's a small department, so it's just me and a kinda new guy. We get there and the sheriff and primary responding department tells us it's just some hunter who got separated from his party, which is fairly normal, happens a couple times a year, but they have the rest of his party sitting in the squad car. I'm talking to the sheriff trying to get a grasp of where they haven't checked yet, and my probie goes to walk around. He came back and said the guys in the back of the squad car were just sitting there staring straight ahead and not blinking. I'm confused at this point because it's a hunting party and they generally call in a missing person early afternoon, not at 11 PM. So I call my buddy at dispatch to try to figure out what's going on. The sheriff wasn't being helpful. He tells me he got some weird call with a man that sounded like he was terrified, but would only whisper about how they're moving. My buddy finally gets the man on the phone to say where they are, and then the guy whispers I think they got him and hangs up. I haven't heard much more on the story, but I know the call came from one of the guys in the hunting party that was in the back of the squad car. A couple months back, a buddy at a neighboring paid department told me 2 of the guys in the party killed themselves shortly after, and the 3rd guy has been in and out of drug treatment centers since that day. I haven't verified any of that, so it could just be rumors. As far as I know, the missing hunter still hasn't been located. Not a 911 op, but I was a debt collector briefly in college and called a woman to try to set up a payment plan for her 5-figure debt. It was around 8 at night her time. She started bawling, saying that she didn't even have enough money for gas to take her daughter to preschool that day, and that she would be better off dead. Which was disturbing, but not as much as when she suddenly started mumbling, "Oh poor sweet baby," and I heard a kid screaming and a loud car engine, but no answer from her. I had my manager call her local 911 who told me not to disconnect. She had strapped her daughter into a car seat and was trying to kill herself in the garage with car fumes. A friend of mine, 911 operator, once told me how he received an emergency call from a guy who had fallen down a manhole during winter time. Evidently he did not pay attention as to where he was walking and drunkenly strolled in his own world and fell into the manhole on his way home from the club by himself. Fortunately he did manage to get a hold of his phone after falling about 5 meters from street level. If not, he could have been in serious trouble. Not like there was a lot of people around on that time. Said the guy had to be lifted out of the manhole by the fire department and had to sew some stitches from a cut he got from the fall. Weekly occurrence. Male complainant calls in about several camouflaged subjects in his yard. Unknown description as they are wearing dark clothing and it's 4 AM, so there's not much light aside from a street light several houses west of the address. Male describes them as tall, slender, most likely males, and they are standing behind the bush in his front yard. 3 subjects, maybe 4. Male puts the phone down momentarily. Faint sounds of vomiting can be heard. When asked to describe what the males are doing, caller states they are now on the neighbor's roof aiming something at him. 3 officers are en route. Male states the subjects are firing microwaves at him and it's making him increasingly nauseated and pleads for the officers to hurry up. Caller refuses medical treatment. Rescue is not dispatched. Caller once again puts his phone down to vomit and then states he has the subjects on video. After officers arrive on scene, the caller disconnects. Officer's status is checked after 10 minutes. Dispatch, I'm 10-4, I'll be clear. 1096 inches. 1096. Mental case. Late evening call. Woman had a medical procedure done on her foot and she wanted me to send an officer out to help her change her dressing. I offered to send a medical crew out and see if they can help, but she didn't want to waste their time. We went back and forth about this. No way would I send a police officer out for this, and told her so repeatedly. The last time I repeated myself that I was not going to send police out to help her with her medical issue, but I would gladly send an ambulance to have her foot attended to by a professional. She got all bent out of shape and screamed at me, "An ambulance for someone who's walking around? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," and slammed the phone down on me. I've also learned in the 10+ years of dispatching to never say I don't think it can get any weirder than this, because something weird happens. One time I actually did help someone that was locked inside their car, washing my car in a manual car wash. I kept hearing someone yelling help. I go look and the van in the next stall had 2 women in it. They needed me to open the door because they were locked in. Their indoor doorknobs were broken. They had electric windows and to get out they would roll the window down and open the doors from the outside. But in the car wash, their car had died. Hence, no rolling down the windows. Now you may think all the doors didn't work, even in the back. Well, these ladies were hoarders. They had crap stuffed to the ceiling and literally only a place for them to sit was free. I was an operator in training for about 6 months and the strangest I ever got was a guy called in and said he had just been carjacked by this hotel and then hung up. Called back the number a few times and couldn't get any more details. While I was trying callbacks, our info channel dispatcher called the cell phone provider and got subscriber information. She recognized the name from a traffic stop that was a block from where the carjacking had supposedly occurred and she had just ran. Confirmed the info and the 2 calls and realized the guy on the traffic stop had called in the carjacking thinking the officers would ditch the traffic stop because the carjacking would be a higher priority. We never did find the phone that he was calling from. There was also one time where another operator had gotten a call from OnStar that they were tracking a stolen car from a nearby city and GPS was showing it now in our jurisdiction. They wanted to get our officers to the vehicle and once they were there they would disable the engine in the vehicle. So we pulled up our traffic cameras on this wall monitor we had and were able to locate the vehicle and direct the officers where the vehicle was going via the cameras. Once in the vicinity, OnStar disabled the vehicle and the driver bailed into an under construction housing subdivision and one of the dispatchers was able to tell our officers exactly which house the guy went into because we could see it on the camera and he was caught. I used to volunteer at a suicide hotline, so this doesn't technically answer the question, but the call is similar to others in the thread. This guy calls and says that he'd escaped from the hospital and had been cutting himself. Obviously anyone could be lying, but he was oddly convincing. He then asks my name and I tell him. He says he's going to carve my name into his arm so he never forgets me. I don't think anything has ever creeped me out more in my entire existence, and I've heard some creepy crap. How do you even respond to that? I had no info on him, no phone number, no address, so I couldn't do anything about it either, even though I was pretty convinced he was actually harming himself at this point. He just hung up on me. There was no record of a similar call before or after this, and people who call in and make this stuff up usually do so multiple times for attention. I think it's probably made up, but I do wonder sometimes whether my name is carved into someone's arm somewhere. Sorry if this doesn't quite fit. I've enjoyed this thread a lot. Brings back lots of memories, haha. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.